And welcome on in to the latest edition of the Blue Horseshoe podcast. I am Ryan Hickey, and guess what? It is a very special pod because I'm solo dolo today. George, unfortunately, under the weather, so I'll just be kind of taking the reins here. And what is going to be a shorter pod, but a little bit of a reaction to what we saw on Saturday night's preseason game number 2, in which none of the starters played for the most part, and also a little bit of a preview as well to joint practices against the Eagles, or joint practice, I should say, against the Eagles, that is commencing on Tuesday. All right, let's start with the game first and then work our way forwards. Look, George and I talked about it leading into the game. We both agreed Anthony Richardson should have played. This is a great opportunity for two things. Number one, reps. Also, number two, to get some sort of pattern down now, and by trial and error, see what works and what doesn't work. I do think when you are a rookie, I do think that establishing some sort of routine, especially for a home game on a game day, is important so you feel prepared and you don't feel rushed going into a game or going into anywhere, any situation where you don't feel like you are fully at 100% come kickoff time. And this is a great opportunity for Richardson to establish some sort of routine, get comfortable, and just make sure everything he's doing is efficient and making sure that he is, again, ready to go by the time the ball is kicked off. And especially having your first home game, running out of the tunnel, getting greeted by the fan, just to have that experience where the games don't count, kind of have that be your trial period, I thought would have benefited Richardson a lot. So I did not agree with the decision to bench Richardson and bench a lot of the starters here in preseason game number 2. I know why Shane Steichen did it. He talked about how he thought basically the two practices against the Eagles, two joint practices against the Bears, were basically two games, and that gave him a lot of reps with the starters to where he didn't need the reps Saturday night in the game. Here's where I disagree with that. Richardson, we talked about, right? The biggest thing we talk about with him is inexperience, getting him reps. And I thought, even though, yes, he took all the starters reps against the Bears Wednesday and Thursday, I don't think there's such thing as enough reps for him going into week number 1. I don't think that's such a thing where he's had enough and he doesn't need any more. I think the perfect illustration of that is Peyton Manning sat down with Mike Chappell, right, legendary Colts reporter, and chatted with him over the weekend. And the one thing Peyton Manning talked about, because he related a lot of his experiences rookie year to what Richardson's going through, and Peyton, I thought, said something that's very important and very relevant to the situation. He said, every rep matters. And he said it took him a little while to learn that, but he realized even in a blowout game in the fourth quarter where they're losing 30-0, even just driving down at the end of the game and scoring touchdown, even though a lot of people would say, hey, that's meaningless. Who cares? Game's already over. Maybe the defense has the backups in. And when you score a touchdown, it's 30-0. What is that really going to do? But Peyton said that really kind of helped develop some confidence and really at least gave him something to take away from what was an otherwise forgettable performance. And so when you hear the legend, right, the GOAT for the Colts say every rep matters, I look at that and translate it for Anthony Richardson's case and say, yeah, he's right. So even though you could feel like, oh, well, we got him all the starters reps on Wednesday against the Bears starting defense, on Thursday against the Bears starting defense, Saturday, a lot of the Bears backups played. So what is a series 2 against Bears backups really going to do for Richardson's development? I would say every rep matters. And Peyton said how many times that he was able to learn things in a game that he never would have learned if he was on the sideline watching. And so for me, even if it's one series, even if it's 2 series, yes, let Richardson get some sort of routine down and figure out what works for him in terms of being prepared for a home game, but also still give him every opportunity to experience something different, even if it is against the second team for Chicago. It still gives him an opportunity to learn and be as prepared as he possibly could be for that week number 1 game against the Jaguars. So for me, it was an opportunity lost. It was a situation where I really thought Richardson would have benefited along with the first team offense. Because also, look, I know it's right training camp, so we're not going to overreact. And it was 3 series against the Bills a week ago now in one preseason game. It's not like the offense has been lighting it up and scoring a ton of points where it's like anytime they're on the field, wow, good things are happening. It's been a lot of mixed results and for the most part, bad, equally bad as good. So when you factor that in as well, where the first team offense is not really playing well, they're not putting up a ton of points, they're very inconsistent. That's not a situation where I think they have quote unquote earned, maybe if you will, the off day or can't learn anything from even a series or 2 in the second preseason game against the Bears backups. So I disagree with what Shane Steichen did in handling Richardson's reps. I think he would have benefited from playing on Saturday. I think he would have benefited also as well from experiencing what a home game in the NFL is like. And you saw the crowd there. If you were there, you know it was a good crowd, almost a sold-out house, a lot of excitement in the building. Again, it's not going to mimic a game-like atmosphere, but it was pretty damn close. So if you're at the game, credit to you. It was a lot of fun to watch it on TV, but also I think it would have been a good experience for him to kind of learn what a home game is like and the different emotions you feel compared to playing in a road stadium. Okay, if you were at the game, hopefully you heard Jim Irsay's comments. Or if you were watching on TV, you obviously heard Jim Irsay's comments when he made his annual appearance in the broadcast booth during the third quarter. He said a few things I want to kind of get into here and discuss. Number one was he talked about Jonathan Taylor. He talked about his excitement about Jonathan Taylor. So we learned after the game as well that JT, right, he's not been there the last week. He was rehabbing elsewhere, and then when he came back, is dealing with a personal issue. Hopefully everything's okay. But Shane Steichen did say after the game, Taylor will travel with the team to Philly. He's not going to practice. Let's just get that right out there. He'll be traveling, but he'll be watching, just like he's been watching the entire training camp. If you have your hopes up of JT participating in joint practice on Tuesday, drop him. He ain't going to be in the field. No shot in how that's happening. But Irsay was talking about his excitement of having JT back and getting him back on the team. He didn't provide any sort of date, didn't provide any sort of injury update. Basically just talked about his overall excitement. And one thing that kind of caught my eye here, I don't know, I don't think I'm reading too much into it, but when I was listening to Irsay, I kind of was like, that's interesting in what he said. And I think Jim Irsay, I don't want to say calculated, but he does speak from the heart. He's not someone who, for the most part, plays a lot of poker or someone who tries to disguise what he's actually feeling. He wears his heart on his sleeve and he tells you exactly what he's thinking, sometimes good, most of the time bad. But when he was talking about Jonathan Taylor and a little bit with Shaq Leonard as well, kind of Shaq missed the game and missed the second joint practice. We found out he's in concussion protocol, but both, right, obviously coming off injury-plagued 2022 seasons, arguably the most important offensive and defensive player on the team, definitely the most skilled offensive and defensive player on the team coming into the season. Irsay, we're talking about both of them, but mostly JT, was saying how it's a long season. It's only August. We're hopeful we can have all our weapons available. The reason why that caught my eye is this. Yes, it's only August, but also we know, I mean, time is ticking here. We're just under 3 weeks from the regular season starting. That to me kind of signaled with Irsay saying it's a long season, it's only August. He does not anticipate Jonathan Taylor being on the field week number one. He didn't say that. That's me kind of grasping at straws of what he's saying and trying to interpret what his words are. But with him trying to basically be like, look, it's a very long season. It's only August. That kind of signals there's no sense of urgency. There's no real timeline for his return. And even though I've been one that's optimistic and believed and predicted on this podcast, hey, Jonathan Taylor, week number one, will be on in a Colts uniform in a game playing against the Jaguars. I think at this point, with what Irsay is saying, that has to lead me to believe that's not going to happen. I don't know if he's going to start the year on PUP. I don't know if he's going to, it's going to be a week-by-week basis, kind of like what we saw with Shaq Leonard last year, where he did not start the season on PUP. And it was a week-by-week situation where each week we monitor his health, and we know that, week number 4 against the Titans was when he made his debut. But that was a week-by-week basis where is he going to play? Is he not going to play each game week? That's what I feel like is going to be Jonathan Taylor's status this year. And I don't think now, if you ask me, after hearing Irsay's comments on Saturday, I don't think right now we'll see Jonathan Taylor week number one for the Colts suited up and healthy and active. And look, Irsay is right in the sense that it's a long season. But again, the quicker you can get Jonathan Taylor on the field, the better. Richardson needs the help. There's still a lot of holes and a lot of areas this team needs to improve upon. And he's one of the best offensive players in the NFL, period. That is going to help Richardson's development no matter what. So again, the faster you can get JT in the field and the faster you have him at full strength, the better this offense is going to be and the better Richardson is going to be. But Irsay kind of taking, we'll say, a more measured approach, not really exuding a sense of urgency for his return, to me signals they don't anticipate or believe Taylor, I'm going to say health-wise, because again, at this point, I don't think it makes sense from a contractual standpoint for him to miss games. We saw over the weekend a report about Raiders running back Josh Jacobs. He is expected to return to the Raiders before week number 1. He realizes, even though he's not under contract, he's not getting fined because he has not signed the franchise tag, he realizes missing game checks is not in his best interest. Saquon Barkley thought the same thing. Austin Eckler thought the same thing. So I think Jonathan Taylor is also going to think the same thing in the sense that he's not going to hold out and sit out week number 1 to send a message. It does not benefit him contractually. It does not make a lot of sense to lose out on a game check if you're already, or, only feel like you're underpaid, make it $4.3 million anyway. And it's not going to do you any good. It's only going to be more of a negative where if you come to the negotiating table after the season, whether it's to the Colts or someone else, they're going to use that as a black mark against you versus a positive. So when you look at Jonathan Taylor, he's not going to be holding out. He's not going to be missing a game because he's healthy but doesn't want to play. It's going to be because that ankle still is not 100%. And so if you're Irsay, when you kind of hear him talk, I think he was more almost speaking to himself of, hey, I'm going to come to grips with Jonathan Taylor, maybe not being there for the beginning of the season, but hey, it's a 17-game season. It's a long year. We still, we have a long way to go. If he's not there week number 1, the world's not ending. And that brings you to the second point that Irsay said that was interesting to me. He was asked, do you think you have the weapons in order to make Anthony Richardson's rookie year a success? Now, they talked about competing in the AFC South that's open. Look, let's be honest here. They're not going to be an AFC South contender this year. That should not be the expectation. That should not be the goal. The goal should be, how can you develop Anthony Richardson as well as you possibly can here in year number 1? And obviously, having good players around you is the easiest and best way to do that. I think too many times that area and aspect is overlooked of who's around the quarterback, which again brings home and hammers on the point as to why Jonathan Taylor needs to be on the field for the Colts this season, why it makes no sense for them to trade him whatsoever, even if he's only here for a year. And you don't franchise tag him, or you trade him and someone else has to deal with the tag, you let him become a free agent. Trading Jonathan Taylor makes zero sense for this team because what you're going to get back is very little. I'd rather have JT with Anthony Richardson for 1 year to make his job easier and the development easier, rather than off the team. You got a draft pick back or two that's probably not going to be that, that big of a deal this time next year in the draft, and you lose one of the best offensive players in the NFL. So, I mean, to no surprise, Irsay the optimist said, yes, we think we got the right pieces, the offensive line, the defense, the continuity between, Chris Ballard and his roster. The Colts are not there yet. The Colts are not there yet, specifically with the offensive line. Look, they got to develop. They got to be better. But that has to be a wait and see more than, I would say, a definite when you talk about areas to make Anthony Richardson's life and development easier this season. The offensive line right now is not at the point where you could say, boom, check, they got that. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Whether it was the Buffalo game, a little bit up and down, enjoying practices early this week as well. They still, and injuries too, right? They still got to get healthy and be a cohesive unit. But that has to be one of those where we got to see how the first month of the season goes before we actually say, boom, that's a check. That's absolutely going forward here for the Colts. And that to me is a concern for this team overall, like overall health, right? We talked about a lot on this podcast in previous weeks, but Irsay says he definitely believes they have the pieces to support Richardson in year number 1. I don't know how that's possible. It might prove to be possible, hopefully, after year number 1, but going into the year, you can't give the benefit of the doubt to this offense right now. Again, the offensive line's a work in progress, and just frankly, because of how training camp has been, we don't see enough, right? Training camp is not that physical anymore. Really, like the preseason for the offensive line specifically is the month of September. Getting in actual game situations where I don't think we'll actually be able to judge this offensive line in totality until week 4 or 5, when they're actually healthy and they've actually played and kind of knocked the rust off. Sure, some periods are live, team versus team or joint practice, but it's still not the same as a game situation. So you're going to find out the offensive line, I would say, a month into the season. And again, coming off of last year, they don't deserve the benefit of the doubt going into the year of, oh yeah, they'll be better. Running back does not deserve the benefit of the doubt right now because Taylor's not healthy. If he was healthy, that's a check mark, boom, no problem. That's the only check mark for this offense. You feel good about going to the season. But JT's health is obviously a huge question. We don't know if and when he's going to play for this team again. The backups, Deion Jackson, Evan Hull are young and unproven. So there's not anyone there you feel confident in could replace Taylor adequately. The receivers are young and promising, but again, Pittman's been a little bit up and down now. I think he's been, unfortunately, the product of some bad quarterback playing, but he's not a guy that you can absolutely say, hey, that's a boom, bona fide number 1 wide receiver. I guess to show you more in order to kind of get that check mark. Alec Pierce has developed a great relationship with Richardson so far, but again, coming off his rookie season, that to me is not a definite you could say, oh yeah, that's a lock for AR. We see Josh Downs, and I thought he was really impressive again and turning some heads on Saturday. That's a guy that I think absolutely is going to be a starter and a key contributor for the Colts this season, and he's working his way and playing his way into being that starting slot receiver come week number 1. But again, he's a rookie as well. So you look around the roster of receivers, there's not a lot of guys you can absolutely say coming into the season, oh yeah, that's a check mark. That's something that, Anthony Richardson can rely on. Tight ends, unproven and unhealthy. That's a problem, right? I like Mo Alley-Cox's blocking ability. I'm high on Jelani Woods' athletic ability, and he could be a long way to go, but could be a game breaker in one of those mismatches where it's impossible to guard. And Drew Ogletree is kind of in that same mold where they are super athletic tight ends, big body, big target for a guy that struggles with accuracy. And Richardson, that could be one of his, 2 best friends this season. The issue is Cox has been in and out of the lineup. Woods can't get on the field, so recovering from last year's injury. Same thing, with Ogletree. And so even though on paper they have the potential, they've not proven it in their young NFL careers, and they've barely been on the field for training camp this year. And so even though Richardson's been taking a lot of the reps with the starters this past week after getting the starting nod, he's not had a lot of reps with this tight end group. And so when you see Pharaoh Brown a lot in your TV screens, Will Mallory got, some action as well here with the starters got a lot of burn in the second preseason game against the Bears. You have, Kylan Granson's really only contributor, anyone with sort of tread on the tires that's been healthy and on the field so far. That's a concern. So Irsay, I know he's an optimistic guy, and I am truly an optimist as well when it comes to sports, especially, life too, but sports especially. I don't see the optimism going into the year. I hope they prove me wrong. But when Irsay says, oh yeah, we got the pieces to support Richardson this season, frankly, that's not the case. That's a hope we do, but that's not a definite going into the year. And so those are the 2 main takeaways I had from Irsay's third quarter interview during the preseason game on Saturday, was his kind of tone and his lack of urgency when it comes to Taylor getting on the field. I think kind of signals they don't expect him to be available week number 1. Also, too, he mentioned Chris Ballard's going to have to, do some work and work some magic. That, again, screams to me, JT is going to get a rework contract this year. It's not going to be an extension, but I think kind of what we saw with Saquon Barkley, with Austin Eckler, I think we'll see it with Josh Jacobs. We have nothing yet, but I think we will see it when he returns, and I think Taylor as well. They're going to get more money up front. There's no reason for the Colts not to do so. $2 million raise, $3 million raise, maybe $5 million with incentives. He is going to get some sort of pay raise going into this year when he finally does. I'm not going to say report to the team, because by all reports, he's back with the team and he's going to travel to Philly. But when he's back on the practice field and actually participating, by the time he's ready to go and actually playing the game, I think the next time we see him on a field in a game, he will be making more than $4.3 million this upcoming season. So that's takeaway number 1 from Irsay. Also, takeaway number 2 is the fact that he is optimistic and bullish on this offense. I'm not there yet, and I don't think you should be as well. One of the areas that, again, we didn't see a lot of starters on offense or defense for this team in Saturday's game, but one area does remain a concern and a problem, whether it's to the starters or the backups, and that's offense continuing to shoot themselves in the foot, continuing to hurt themselves with self-inflicted wounds, mainly penalties. Look at the first 3 drives of the game. This screams out what is going to be one of the defining points for the Colts this season. The first 2 drives of the game, they had first downs taken away and drives ultimately stall because of penalties. Offensive pass interference and holding. Those 2 penalties wiped away first downs for the Colts, put them in 3rd and long, couldn't convert, punt. Third drive of the game, Gardner Minshew's finest moment in that game, number 2. What happened? Drove right down the field, nice long drive, touchdown. You know what happened on that drive? 0 penalties. When the Colts are not killing themselves, when they're not beating themselves, when they are not wiping away momentum after a good play with a self-inflicted wound, whether it's with a penalty, whether it's with a drop pass, this team can move the ball this year. We saw it in the Buffalo game when the starters were out there. They were able to move the ball in 2 out of the 3 Richardson drives. The issue is short yardage was an issue in one drive. The second issue was drop pass and a holding call, wiped away any sort of momentum in that 3rd and final drive. But you saw even with the backups, 2 drives, 2 penalties, 2 punts. 1 drive, no penalties, touchdown. They can move the ball. But the Colts right now on offense are not good enough to overcome their own self-inflicted wounds. If you have Patrick Mahomes, yeah, you can overcome a holding call and convert a 3rd and 14. If you have Joe Burrow and you have a drop pass, you could overcome that and still score a touchdown on that drive. And it's not an insult to Richardson or anyone on this offense. It's the reality of they're developing. They're still getting their legs under them. They are not good enough right now to overcome 1 or 2 mistakes on a drive. They need to stay ahead of the chains. They need to do themselves favors and cannot get behind the 8 ball. And so even though, again, it's not the starters what we'll see, it's still a constant theme that has not been able to be shaken so far. We saw it last year. I mean, last year was more the turnovers, right? They get into opponent's territory, and then Matt Ryan drops the ball. He throws a pick. Jonathan Taylor fumbles. Offensive line blows up, and there's a sack. This team was able to move the ball over midfield pretty frequently, but as soon as they got into opponent's territory or as soon as they got into the red zone, sack, fumble, pick, turnover on downs, unable to get short yardage conversions on 4th down. They did not help themselves. And guess what? We saw the result of that, 4-12-1. Awful season. This team is not good enough to overcome their mistakes. And it's concerning so far that that's been the theme of training camp, or one of the themes of training camp. I'm sure Shane Steichen is aware and frustrated, but until this team stops beating themselves, we're not going to see, I think, a lot of points scored on offense, and we're not going to see a lot of drives end with 7, even frankly 3. That was one of the frustrations as well. The secondary on Saturday, no surprise. Look, Jalen Jones has been a player, and that's one of, I think, the positives of having a young, inexperienced secondary outside of Kenny Moore, but especially a corner, is the fact that there's talent on this team. Like, there's talent in the secondary, I should say. And right now, yes, Dallas Flowers and Dow Baker Jr. look to have the starting roles for the most part locked down, but Juju Brents is going to get a lot of burn. Jalen Jones is going to get a lot of burn. Darius Rush, even though he got burned on a stop and go route for a touchdown, he's going to get a lot of burn, and rightfully so. This secondary is a ball hawking unit. I think it's going to be around the ball a lot. I think it's going to make plays and turnovers. Also going to get torched on double moves and for long passes and long gains. But there is talent. And I think I would argue, I think we talked about this on the pod last week. I would argue corner is the position that's hardest to make the jump from college to the NFL. Quarterback is right there. But when you are a corner in college, again, you could be faster than a lot of guys. You can run the routes. But now it's a truly different level when you go to the NFL. We see how good receivers are. If you had a receiver draft, or I should say a fantasy draft, I did over the weekend. If you have as well, what's coming up, look at how many receivers go in the first 2 rounds. Receivers now replace running back when it comes to, if you have the number 1 overall pick. In our league, Justin Jefferson went first. A lot of other, rankings have Justin Jefferson as the best fantasy player. We are going to see now slowly, and I think sooner rather than later, the receivers kind of be now the position that goes fastest and first in most fantasy drafts compared to what used to be running backs. And so there's so many talented receivers, so many tremendous athletes. The route running is crisper. The speed is better, that it's so hard now to make that transition. And you rarely see corners come in and play lockdown defense right away. So it's going to be ugly, I think, for a large part of the secondary this year, but there's talent there. Jalen Jones is a former 5-star recruit at A&M. Rush has what you want. Juju Brents has what you want, size-wise, physicality-wise, to fit this defense. They're going to get a lot of run. And I'm excited to kind of see how this secondary unit develops this season. But I think you saw, in a small sample size, you saw some flashes of talent against the Bears, but also you see kind of, oh yeah, this is still an inexperienced secondary. They're going to get burned a lot as well. It could be an up and down season. So that's kind of, again, for me, like the biggest takeaway, especially because so many backups played. On Saturday, you did have a lot of corners playing, and that's going to be one of the, again, takeaways that just kind of showed itself again. Not that we didn't come to that conclusion before, but we saw it again happen on Saturday. And brace yourself, prepare yourself for that this season. Okay, finally, I want to kind of look ahead to a little bit of the joint practices for this team against the Eagles. They're going to have one joint practice on Tuesday, and then the short week where they have the Thursday night game on Amazon, nationally televised. There we go, in Philly on Thursday. Steichen said after the game on Saturday that he's not sure if Richardson's going to play yet, but he's leaning towards maybe that's a possibility of Richardson and the starters getting maybe at least one drive on Thursday in Philly. They'll obviously get a lot of work on Tuesday against the Eagles starters. Look, I think, again, you heard me at the start of the podcast. I think Richardson should have played on Saturday. I think he absolutely should play on Thursday. You're going to have 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks between Thursday's preseason finale and the start of the regular season. A lot of time where if someone gets banged up, you could still recover from it. But also, too, just again, give Richardson the reps. Even if the Eagles don't play, I don't know if you watched any of the Eagles preseason games so far. Can't blame me if you don't. But if you haven't, this team is loaded, like obviously. But that's an obvious statement for the starters. They got tremendous depth. They have tremendous depth where they're basically Georgia North, right? Or Georgia of the pros, where they have talented guys that are right now the backups. So even if Philly does not play any starters on Thursday, you are still going against high-level competition. So if you're Richardson and the offensive line, Richardson and the receivers, you're still getting good work. You're still getting a challenge to where, even though it's not the best of the best, it's still pretty damn good. And then you're going to have your work cut out for you, which is going to be a great learning experience for this team. So they're going to play the starters and then join practice on Tuesday. That's going to be an eye-opening experience. I think it's going to be a tremendous test for this offensive line to go against that beast of a defensive line in front seven for Philadelphia. And even if the backups play, there's still a lot of talented players that will be starters on most teams that are right now going to get some burn on Thursday. So it's not even a question for me. Play Richardson on Thursday, get him some reps, whether it's a first quarter, even if it's 2 series. 2 series, 10 plays, 12 plays, to me, is still better than nothing. Again, remember what Peyton Manning told Mike Chappell when they did an interview recently. Every rep matters, and every single rep is going to make you better, even if it's quote-unquote meaningless. It still definitely made Peyton Manning a better quarterback and helped develop his rookie year where he went 3-13 to flipping that record around in year number 2. Peyton credits a lot of those meaningless reps that he got where he did not miss a snap his rookie year. And he said that made him a better quarterback going forward. That could be the same case here, I think, for Richardson, where every rep truly does matter. So outside of quarterback, obviously, that's what we're watching at. I'm watching the trenches, offensive line and defensive line. Look, the Colts, it's obvious, right? I still think now, even though it's been a quarterback-driven game, games are still won in the trenches. The offensive line is going to have their work cut out for them, and they need to, bare minimum, hold their own, if not get a push against this vaunted Philly defensive line. But also on the other side, like, look, the Colts got to get after the quarterback. They got some young guys. They got some talent there as well. But now they got to start generating some consistent pressure. And this is a tremendous test for Kwity Paye, for Dio Dangbo. We'll see, with the health of Grover and especially DeForest Buckner, if they'll be able to go, especially DeForest, give it a go at all, either in joint practice on Tuesday or the game on Thursday. Shaq Leonard as well is in concussion protocol. Probably means he's out both Tuesday and Thursday, but we'll see how he does progress. But it's going to be a great test for this defensive line going against one of the best offensive lines in the NFL against the Eagles O-line. A great chance for them to go up against the best and try to establish some sort of pressure against a unit that is, the creme de la creme. You got to protect Richardson, number 1, but also you got to start generating pressure here, number 2. And even though, again, it's a game driven by the passing game, quarterback-centric, receiver-centric now, but we, again, see high-flying offenses like the Chiefs and Bengals led by their quarterback. If you can't protect, if you can't get a push, if you can't get a push on your defense and you're leaving your secondary out to dry, that is where the games are won and lost still. And this is a great test. I'm so happy that the Colts scheduled this and now are getting a test against the defending NFC champs. It's going to be a huge test. And for me, that's the biggest thing I'm watching here is how the offensive and defensive lines do against, again, the bar setter, if you will, out there in Philly. So it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I think a really exciting. George will not be in Philly, so we'll see how much access we do get as well, video-wise. And obviously, we'll see the game national televised on Thursday as well. But that's something that I'm very excited to see and very excited to see how this team responds. Hopefully, health-wise, they're going to be there. We'll see what Ryan Kelly. We'll see what Will Fries as well. That offensive line has been banged up. So hopefully, they can get back to full health. And, we'll see the A unit, if you will, out there either on Tuesday and or Thursday. But that's definitely the biggest thing I'm watching, as well as we do get set for the third and final preseason game coming up here on Thursday as we get closer and closer to week number 1 starting. So that'll do it for this edition of the Blue Horseshoe Pod. Again, Ryan Hickey solo with you here. George, hopefully we'll be back. He's battling a little bit of an illness. No timetable on George. He's day-to-day, if you will. So here's our plan. We're just going to make this up on the fly. I think my plan is either way, whether Georgia's healthy or not, we're going to record a podcast on Tuesday, probably closer to Tuesday night. So if you're a night owl like I am, you'll catch it Tuesday night. If you're more of a early bird, Wednesday morning it'll be on your Blue Horseshoe feed. Make sure you subscribe and download to the Blue Horseshoe podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube as well, Blue Horseshoe podcast. So that is our plan for right now. We will have a pod either again late Tuesday night or early Wednesday morning. It will be released reacting to the final joint practice of training camp. And then on Thursday, again, depending on Georgia's health or not, either we'll have most likely probably Friday morning record our reaction to the third and final preseason game, kind of give you our biggest takeaways going into the weekend. So check it out either the latest Wednesday morning for joint practice reaction, and then Friday morning reaction to the Colts-Eagles preseason game number 2. Then, obviously, as we kind of get into game week, next week, because it's like a quote-unquote bye week, if you will, there's no preseason game, training camp's over, and there's no open practices left for us to watch. Georgia will be at practice, but again, it's a little bit different in season. You don't get as much access. So we'll kind of give you a little more generic season preview. So that may be just 1 or 2 pods next week as we ramp up for game week to be here as well. And then obviously we'll get into the full Monty, and we'll let you know what our game week schedule for podcasts is going to be like. We will have Behind Enemy Lines back again for year number 2. One of my favorite segments is we do get an opposing beat writer on to kind of give you the other perspective going into each and every game as well. So that will start obviously when the game week starts, the second week of September, I guess really first full week of September, if you will, getting set for Colts-Jags, September 10th, right here, coming up sooner rather than later. So that'll do it for this edition of the Blue Horseshoe Pod. Appreciate you again joining us here, making us a part of your evening/day, and kind of going to us here for all your Colts content. Make sure you stay tuned. Hopefully, George, health-wise, will be back and better than ever tomorrow when we do record the joint practice reaction. But until we talk to you, again, Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you right after Colts-Eagles joint practice right here on the Blue Horseshoe Podcast.